we will talk about some interesting things that came up in the news since the last episode. Last episode, we talked about RSA. We talked about a bunch of different things. AI coming for people's jobs. And without any surprise, there's a lot of things in the news now that are consistent with those themes. Not RSA, of course, right? So this is what we've got for this week. Crypto scams. How people are scamming on YouTube. And how we, not necessarily the victim, but we're, we made some executive decisions to cut out the crypto scam comments from some of our videos. Then we're going to lead into a crypto robbery in Vegas recently.
Yeah, $4 million of crypto.
What could you do with $4 million? You could do a lot. You could actually invest it and just live off the interest if you wanted. If you're happy with $100,000 a year. Let's see here. Google is now stepping in to stop, we'll say, bad actors on their platform, right?
With it inside the browser.
Internally. So it's nothing, people don't have to install anything. It comes native in the Google browser.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd like to talk about that.
Okay. So we'll talk about that. One interesting thing, because when people are on Google, they're usually looking for answers. And a lot of times people tend to find themselves in a situation where they don't have money or budget allocated to do baselining. And in one instance, there are some bad actors creating a mirror site of RVTools, which is a free tool that people use to, we'll say, understand the resources their virtual environment is using. So that way, when they go to upgrade, they can let all their partners and vendors know sizing requirements without having to spend days trying to figure it out. Helps them kind of get into new stuff without spending months understanding what they need. So there's that story. And then maybe we'll just talk about some layoffs recently where AI is involved, right? So I think we've got enough, but we'll start with the crypto scams. So,
well, I mean, let's go back to the comments, right? So we haven't had a whole lot of videos posted out there on YouTube.
No, like 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 tops.
Well, two. This is episode 3.
Yep.
So we had 2 previous long format episodes and a bunch of shorts.
They're doing pretty well, by the way. So if people haven't seen those, where do they go to find them? We now have a website.
Oh, we have a domain that we redirect.
Yeah, we have a domain. We don't have a website yet. We're almost there, people. We have a domain, cyberpodcast.net. And what that does is that sends you to the YouTube channel. So if you're listening and you want to watch, or if you're watching and you want to watch some more, you just go on cyberpodcast.net. And the fact that no one has scooped that up blows my mind. Some people out there slacking. But back to these videos that we have. So I saw this comment like a week ago. And I don't remember what it said exactly, but it was something along the lines of, hey, I love this stuff, but what do I do with my wallet? I have an offline wallet with these secret phrases.
Yeah, with the seed phrase included.
Yeah, and they just listed it. And I said, how would you get your money off of this? Now, to be clear, I own 0 crypto. I am not a crypto king. I wouldn't be considered a crypto peasant. So I have when people talk about wallets, offline wallets, anything crypto, my eyes just glaze over. So Damien or Troy, walk me through how someone could get scammed through losing their wallet. Like, is that a thing? If you have the seed phrase, I don't even understand.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast have crypto, at least some. Some may have more. I know a lot of people in the cyber industry were early adopters of Bitcoin and other, digital currencies. But, to be honest, this is just really data savings. You have a master data vault, which is where all your, stuff is stored, whatever kind it is, Ethereum, Bitcoin, all the altcoins. And then you have your master phrase or the thing that lets you in to control it. And so, there are people all the time which using social engineering that are defrauding these people and getting access to their root phrase and, just doing all kind of scams. When I talk to folks over at Coinbase from the identity or from the fraud department, it is ridiculous to hear some of the scams that these people, leverage. And I would advocate we have one of those folks on the podcast someday to tell us, because it's just fascinating. But, it just goes back to the plain old social engineering, the fraud, and, taking advantage of the human part, the sense of urgency, defrauding of people. So I think that there's been a lot of people that have fallen victim to those scams over time. But what I think is interesting is, and for those who hold any type of cryptocurrency, this is a stark awakening type of article that we heard this week about your physical security. You always hear maybe, somebody finds out I have a bunch of crypto, they're going to come after me physically. And that's what happened here in Las Vegas. Damien, I'll let you go into it.
Yeah, I mean, the Las Vegas one is completely different. I mean, we're talking about maybe scammers trying to get your passphrase to your wallet remotely, virtually. And I'm not sure exactly how those comments lead to an actual scam, but it could be just like a marketing thing to try to get you to a specific wallet, for example. Mm-hmm. But I think with the Vegas thing in the news recently, actually just last week, we saw some really young people, right? I think there were teenagers get arrested and they're in trial right now for kidnapping someone and stealing $4 million in crypto from that particular person.
Yeah. So it was actually 3 teenagers. So they kidnapped this older gentleman at gunpoint and drove him into the desert. This is kind of like Breaking Bad style, right? When they took Saul Goodman to the desert, and they buried, or they dug out this grave, and they said, "Hey, tell us what we need to know." And then, of course, they take off their mask, and he's like, "Wait, you guys?" So I imagine this is obviously not the same, but 3 teenagers took him out into the desert and stole $4 million in crypto and other digital assets. Well, it wasn't just crypto; it was a few other things. So, 16, but they're from Florida,
so it's targeted.
Very much so.
Yes, it sounds like he was holding some type of a cryptocurrency get together, meet up here in Vegas, and they followed him out and home. And he had some non-fungible tokens, some NFTs, and some other assets leading up to the $4 million. But it could be $4 million. You might have $100,000, and that might be a lot to you. It's less about the $4 million, and it's more about your physical safety. I mean, they could have killed this guy, so that he didn't talk. They could have physically harmed his family. We've seen that as well in other cases where the physical element comes into play. So if you are holding cryptocurrency, my advice is just like if you have gold stuck in your safe at home, you want to make sure not to talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
Know that you have it. Yeah. Don't say, "Hey, I'm rich on Bitcoin." It just makes yourself a target. So we're trying to remove that target.
I like Friend's approach. So if you're watching this, I do not own any major crypto holdings. There's no need. I'll give you my wallet. There's probably a couple bucks in there. I view crypto really as just a utility to make payments. I don't really look at it as an investment vehicle, which, a lot of people will have different opinions on that.
Yeah. Like, I'll give a really good example. Like with Zelle, they limit you on how much you can send within a certain period of time, right? And it gets really frustrating when you're trying to send money to the same person over certain dollar amounts. Maybe say like pay a bill, right? PayPal is a little bit better. So it's nice to have these tools to send money, right? But I've never gotten into crypto. I guess maybe I just like to have the cash where I can just see it and grab it and kind of move it. Whereas crypto, I'd be worried I would lose something or someone would get access to it, and then it's just everything's gone, right?
Isn't that the same for your bank account?
It is to an extent, but I think there's a lot of things in place. Like if you were to go into your bank, you obviously need your ID and all this other stuff. So there's ways people can fake certain things. There's a signature, there's the physical ID. You have to go in to do wires a lot of times. If you're sending wires through your phone, like with Bank of America, for example, they let me do it now because I went inside and I signed some paperwork that says I want to do it on my phone. So maybe that opens me up to additional risk potentially, but it was more of a convenience thing. But I also don't keep very much at Bank of America. So worst case scenario, they're going to wire out nothing, right?
That's so. I actually use that concept as well. I have a specific bank account
Yeah.
that I use for online payments,
Only.
Zelle, Cash App.
Yeah. It's almost
Venmo.
like a repository, or not a repository, just like a place where you send money like once a month and you distribute. It's like a distribution account. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I do that because if someone gets access to that account, okay, like what's going to really happen? Not much. Now, if they get access to other stuff like a crypto wallet with $4 million in it, I'm toast, right? So maybe I've been doing things right without realizing it, but I just don't understand how. Well, I do understand how, but I think part of it is if you have a lot of money, just be aware.
Well, I mean, a lot of that is physical security, right? I think in this case, the guy in Vegas, that was a physical security concern where it didn't matter if it was crypto. Like Troy said, if it was gold, if he had a stockpile of gold at home, consider that gone.
Well, you could even do. There's been people in like LA. So this is off topic, but have you ever heard of the Timepiece Gentleman? No. Okay. So he was.
Oh yeah, actually, yes, that happened here in Scottsdale, didn't it?
So he was in Scottsdale. So this is kind of non-security related, but it's interesting because this guy essentially used social media, Instagram, YouTube, mostly YouTube. Got a pretty significant following of like 100,000, 200,000 people followed him because all he did was talk about watches. And he always had nice watches. And what he would do is he would offer consignment. So most dealers, when you're in the watch world, like, and we're talking expensive watches, like 10,000 plus, 20,000 plus, he's selling watches that are worth $500,000, $250,000. 1.7 million was a watch he had at one point. It was all crystal. And what he would do is he would post all these things on social media and then present himself in a certain way to say, hey, send me your watch and we'll put it on consignment. Now, the nice part about consignment is, he doesn't have to spend the money to get the watch, right? You just send it to him. But what was actually happening was he was putting things on consignment, selling it, and then pretending like the money hadn't been transferred. And then he would go out and gamble it. He would go out and lose it at the casino. He would blow it on fancy dinners. Like, there's tons of videos of him on YouTube.
Is this proven or is this all alleged?
That's proven. I think he's actually convicted now. Like, I think he got 17 years or something like that. But we'll just say allegedly, just to be safe. But if you were to go on YouTube under Timepiece Gentleman and look for him, you would see is Anthony Farrer, I think, Anthony F. And he's got tons of videos of him just living this lifestyle where people would send him watches, he would take the money, spend it, and it essentially became a Ponzi scheme. So in Arizona specifically, there's a place in Scottsdale that he went to because they posted a watch for sales, or a Richard Mille, $250,000 watch. I think it was like a RM11. And he said, hey, that's my watch. And he tried to take it. Said, this got stolen from me at some event. So they called the cops. Cops came and then nothing happened, but he didn't get the watch. But essentially, it's just a scammer, right? So another crazy story about scams, because they happen all around us. But in his specifically, he was doing like this, I forgot what it's even called, where he takes it in and sells it. Nothing comes from that because he was actually just keeping the money. So, but it is interesting because it's along the, I think when it was all said and done, he was in the hole upwards of $5 million in watches. So if anyone's ever asking you for anything, they're asking you to give them something. So if someone ever asks you to give them something of value so that they can sell it for you, you probably should have some paperwork in place, right? I've never consigned anything, so I don't necessarily know how that would work. But with this guy in particular, he definitely was taking people's watches and going to casino and losing it on blackjack, allegedly.
Tale as old as time, right? But I think the moral of this story, especially the article this week, was, if you have money, don't flash it. And if you have crypto, don't, go talking about it on the open interwebs. You're going to make yourself a target. Just like this guy did. And thank God he walked away. I think he had to walk 7 miles through the desert to get to a gas station to call for help. But, thank God he's alive. They didn't kill him. But again, if you have that kind of, clout in the crypto world, these folks are watching. Just know that people are out there looking for the chance to take advantage of you, both physically and, fraudulently. So be careful.
Yeah. I mean, think about how you break a case like that, though. That's what was going through my mind. Okay. So how did they catch these suspects that are on trial now? There's got to be cell phone pinging.
The funny thing is about this is, there's more digital evidence with crypto than anything. There's like an indelible, chain of transactions from the time that the money is transferred to these kids' account and wherever they tried to launder it through, whether it even through a tumbler, these guys can find it. Chain analysis. There's so many, distributed ledger forensic companies out there that could find this. It's ridiculous to try to steal crypto because it's probably the most tangible thing to track.
And that's what I mean. That's where it would start, right? I mean that chain is available for anyone to analyze. It's not necessarily private. It's pseudo-private, right? Because if you don't know who owns those wallets, then you don't necessarily know who has it, but you can track the transactions on the chain. So it's really hard to try to wash it. I'm sure there's ways to do it and try to generate thousands of transactions to try to get it lost. But I was also getting to the point that they dropped them off in the desert. I'm very familiar with it. I drive past it all the time between Arizona and Las Vegas. They probably had cell phones. They probably had devices. So I'm sure triangulation happened where you could see what devices were in that area. Yeah. What devices were around the area where he got kidnapped in Las Vegas.
And then tie them together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially now with cars, a lot of cars are connected, if you will. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing crimes, there's not very many options unless you've got a 1960s car or something.
Well, especially in this age where everything's connected and everything's digital. There's so much data.
Yeah, and even every light. I remember 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, you go to a stoplight, they didn't have cameras. Now every intersection has cameras. They know what cars are driving through based on license plates. I don't even understand how criminals feel like they could ever get away doing certain things because there's so much recordings going on around us. The connectivity, the triangulation with the phones. I don't watch a lot of these TV shows on Netflix, but my wife does. And the true crime shows. And a lot of them, they do this cell tower pinging to put people in certain places at certain times. So I don't know. It's a crazy world, but $4 million gone. Now these 16-year-old kids are on trial or will be soon. So like Troy said.
I think 2 of them. I think one's still missing.
Oh. No.
Yeah.
Just don't flaunt your wealth if you've got it. Wear an Apple Watch. Right?
Yeah.
We'll get on to the next one, though, because we've been on that one for a little bit. So, and this is interesting because it's going to kind of lead into the next topic where Google is now within the browser stopping, we'll say scammers. I just like to call everyone a scammer. So, Damien, this was an article that you kind of sent over for us to look at. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what Google's doing to help people.
Well, one of the biggest things that we see with browser attacks are these pop-ups. And sometimes the pop-ups sit there, take over the entire screen, and you have no choice but to click on it. And it takes you to a malicious site or it downloads some command and control application. And because it does that to a lot of lay people, right? People that don't really know what's going on or they think it's a real tech support. Hey, click here, something's wrong with your machine, it's infected. Click here, we'll fix it, or click here and call us. And it takes you right to the scammers. I think a lot of those scams still appear daily, right? To probably millions of people. I think Google's in a good spot, especially with the Chrome browser, where you could put in some AI to really analyze that type of behavior. So if there's a pop-up happening or if there's an ad that's being displayed, making sure there's no, malicious JavaScript embedded in there.
Yeah, but so this is interesting because at some point we talked about, not here, within the last year, is where scammers will take out ads, right? to malicious sites. So this is completely separate from that.
Completely separate. Like I think most security gateways and URL proxies will look at it on click. So you've got to actually click on it, and then it will decipher whether you should go or not. I think this moves that up front where it shouldn't even display it to you. I think we can leverage AI to look at what is being displayed and then make a pretty good probability determination of whether that should be allowed or not, or that's malicious, or that's an attacker.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, it's almost like Google is sandboxing their own browser.
I don't know if it's sandboxing.
But like, are they taking on the risk and clicking on these things to determine, or are they kind of doing that before?
No. I think you could look at it like if you look at it with the lens of, okay, I have a cybersecurity analyst looking over my shoulder.
Okay,
and maybe I shouldn't click on that. And the analyst says, "Oh yeah, that looks like phishing," or "Oh yeah, that looks like a scam." Let me just move that away for you. Don't need to see that. And then those pop-ups that happen that take over your entire browser screen where you can't click out of it, those definitely need to stop.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And they play music. So one thing, Damien, my question is here, is this just for those browser-based attacks where it pops up something like a pop-up, or is this also the Microsoft, help, 1-800 number? So we see a lot of times where the screen just goes to you can't click off it and it says you need to call 1-800 Microsoft, which is absolutely not Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
But your computer has a problem, call 1-800 Microsoft. And what that 1-800 number goes to is a call center. And I'm going to use India as an example. No fault or foul against India, but I have physically been in one of these call centers in India with the Indian police when they broke up one of these rings. It's like an office building where these people come to work 8 to 5. And they're doing this as a living, right? So the 800 number goes to a guy in India. He's answering the phone. Hello, thank you for calling Microsoft. And then he's installing some kind of a remote viewer on your machine, Team Viewer or Anywhere Connect or whatever it could be. And then once they have access to your computer, they're looking for data to take from you. They're looking for malware to drop on your computer so they can get back in if you cut the call. And a lot of times, as Damien mentioned, they're not targeting security professionals or IT professionals, but what they're doing is they're hitting our end users. They're hitting our folks that are not technically savvy. They're hitting our mothers, our grandmothers, our parents. People fall for this all the time. It's unfortunate. So it'd be really good to hear if Google's trying to tackle that problem statement as well.
Yeah, I don't know much about it right now. I think it's just been announced. But to your point, Troy, I think a lot of this, even if you get past that stage of calling in to a fake help desk for Microsoft or for Apple, if they start to take over a remote browser session, I think there's a lot that AI could say, wait a second, the origination of where this is coming from is known to be malicious, right? Or the phone number displayed on the screen is known to be a fake number. Here's the real. Just replace it. Why don't we do that? If you get a Microsoft support number pop up, right, Troy, like you said, can't the browser just replace it with the real Microsoft support number?
I'm sure they could.
They could either replace it or, so now that I have an iPhone, I've been welcomed to the community of iPhones. I've noticed that a lot of times when I get calls now, before when I had a Google, like an Android phone, I get calls from random numbers and I would just pick up. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe it's someone that I'm waiting on. Rarely, but maybe, right? I'll pick it up. And of course, hey, we're calling about this. Are you looking to sell this, right? Or it's never been my car warranty. It's never been that. It's always been someone trying to sell something like, hey, we have this, or public record stuff. Hey, we noticed you have this. Are you looking to sell it? Right? Now, with my handy dandy iPhone, it always says potential spam. Right? And I think, so that's when it comes into your phone. I think it'd be interesting if when you dial out, if it marked the number as potential scam, right? Because if they know that it's a scam number coming into my phone, I'm sure there's a database somewhere where they know that if I dial out to it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Like, so why, and I think with enough people that either get scammed or complain about it, should be able to tag a number as a scam number. And then that would just make it a little bit more difficult for these bad actors to.
Well, then they would just go and get a brand new number.
That's fine, right? But now instead of them sitting back and just waiting for people to call, they're forced to put in more effort, right? And I would say most criminals are lazy, right? A lot of times they are. We'll say maybe I know a couple. So there's some funny stories that I've got. But a lot of times they're lazy. They don't think about certain things. So the more you make someone work for the money, the less likely they are going to try and do it, right? So if every time their number comes up and it gets blocked, they now have to go. It essentially puts them on the run, right? Versus them collecting. And whether or not that makes an impact, I have no idea. But to me, it would seem a good step to help people that don't know what they're doing on the computer, or maybe vigilant enough to understand what's potentially happening, to at least just say, hey, this number's been known as a scam number. I don't know why we don't have that, but
so my phone is set up so that if you're not in my contact list, my phone doesn't ring. It goes straight to voicemail.
Same.
Yeah. So Troy, let me ask you this, because I know this comes up quite a lot. I get salespeople asking me, well, what do you do with cold calls, or what do you think of cold calling? And Fern's laughing because he probably is on the other end of that. And I'll say, look, I really don't see them. Mm-hmm. And then the odd time that I'm waiting for a phone call and I take that setting off and I answer the call and it's a cold call, what do you think my reaction is?
Oh, hell, man.
It's not great.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, cold calls to someone's cell phone is a no-no. I've seen CISOs actually block vendors because of that. If you want to cold call me, call my office, leave a message with my EA.
Yeah, but how many people have office phones? Yeah. Like, do you have an office phone, Troy?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I have a virtual number.
Yeah.
But over time, people they got my cell phone number, and then that got propagated to other CISOs, and then those CISOs ended up on the vendor side. It's a nightmare, right? So anyway,
I think most CISOs have an EA, right? I think most CISOs have an 800 number or a work number they can have on their business card, or at least give to you to call. So but cold calling doesn't work. I think that's the root of the problem, right? Cold calls are just not the way to attract. And we talked about this in a previous podcast, but it's the warm intros, right? That really matter. It's the outreach on LinkedIn messaging or an email, but certainly not cold calling somebody's cell phone. I know it's out there. I know it's tempting, but certainly not a cold call. I do get a text message every now and again because I'm like you, Damien. I just send everything unknown to voicemail, but I still think that's a bit much. This is our personal space, right? We need a way to get away from work sometimes, and when you're out on the lake with your kids and the cell phone rings and it's a vendor, that's just not a good look for the vendor.
Well, how are they supposed to know you're on a boat? Or like how
they're not, which is exactly the point.
So let me ask you this, just to play devil's advocate, because I've been on the other side of that for a long time. You said, call the EA, call the 800 number. When was the last time you actually checked that box? Like inbox?
Every day, yeah.
So wait, you check voicemails from vendors and you listen to them?
Actually, we have, of course, like everybody, we have AI that transcribes our voicemails. I get an email immediately from my voicemail telling me who it is, what they said. And I do follow up on the ones that I'm curious about.
Okay.
So 10 years ago when my EA answered my phone, I never checked the messages, really, at all. Like usually if it's a vendor calling to try to sell me something, never. So I give you kudos, Troy, because I don't think I could keep up with that.
No. Yeah, it's hard to keep up. The volume is so expensive. But one other thing I used to do, which is pretty interesting, and I advocate for other CISOs to do this, is just pick one per month. I used to do this all the time. Just pick one random per month that you've never heard of, never heard from before, and just take a call and just listen to him. One time I got a young kid. It was his first BDR job. Never done this before. Didn't know how to act. I ended up coaching him through the whole process and telling him what he should say, what he shouldn't say, who he should talk to, what he should ask about, and create a relationship. So I think it's just a way to give back as well.
So what's your preference? Is it a LinkedIn reach out or is it email? Obviously not phone calls.
Yeah, not phone calls from my cell phone. That's a big no-no. And then not just for me. I've heard this feedback from other CISOs. I think that's just the line people don't want you to cross. But I do think that the warm intro is the best one. Find somebody in their network that can introduce you. The second one would be, just a completely, random LinkedIn message. But do your homework, right? You got to say who the person is. Hey, I see that you work at this company that may have this problem we see across your industry, and we do this that might help you. if you'd like to set up further time, let me know. An email, of course, is a good way to get through. But with today's spam filters on email boxes, it's hard to get into the CISO's inbox because not only do you have spam filters, but we have this thing called marketing or outreach or subscription. There's 3 or 4 filters that go in place before your email actually hits the CISO's inbox. So if you're sending a cold outreach to email, it may not ever get in front of them. So that's one thing to consider. Industry events, meeting people, find out, where the CISO is going to be and try to be there and meet them face to face. Things like that. Do your research and get to know the company, what they do for a living instead of just coming in blind, which I've also seen. So we've seen the best and the worst, right, Damien? It's just a matter of those who can do better are the ones who can create a relationship and be authentic, be their authentic self, and it shines through.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the problem is a lot of times BDRs or anyone in like the SDR role, any sort of development role, they don't understand where the number came from. They get it from a broker of some sort. They get a list, they throw it in their tools to call, and they just smile and dial, right? I don't think with the way that things go nowadays, people intentionally call cell phones. I think a lot of times they could if they like, single-handedly say, hey, I want to call Damien. I'm going to find a cell phone number. I'm going to call him. In that case, it's different. But I think in a lot of cases, these BDRs kind of have an account list. They have a contact list within that account. They merge that with like a Zoom Info, an Apollo, a Seamless AI, and they get an output, which is just a list. And then they take that list and they drop it into like an Orem, for example, which is an auto dialer. And they're not necessarily aware that the number is a cell phone. They just know that it's the number for a person. Who it is on their list. What kind doesn't matter. Their job is to get on the phone, right? So I think a lot of times people in sales get a bad rap for calling cell phones, especially in like the development role. But reality is, knowing people in those roles, they're just smile and dial the number and pray that you get someone, because the pickup percentage is less than 5%. It's actually
that would be less. I would say less than that.
I think it's closer to 2%, but even emails like abysmally low. So, but I like Troy's idea about picking one a month and then talking to them.
I like that too. The problem with it, the one, I'm always the skeptic. Sorry, Troy. Like, I don't know necessarily who I'm talking to on the other end. Right. So I don't know if I would necessarily help that person from the very beginning. The odd time that I accidentally answer the call and I let somebody do their pitch, if it's good, maybe, but you have to be really good to first make me happy again, because you just interrupted what I was trying to do.
Yeah, for sure. You have to be selective of who you're going to help out like that. And honestly, like I said, you can tell from the call if the person's being genuine, right? And then you just get this kind of like, hey, I want to help you. Let me tell you what you did wrong here, and point them in the right direction.
Yeah. What you did wrong here is you called my cell phone.
Don't ever call the cell phone. So since we're talking about people reaching out, right, we need to find a way to grow the DTF Cyber Podcast. And this is like, if we're on YouTube, this is like where you have the ad fall in, but because we're not big enough, we can't get an ad. So we're just going to make our own ad on the spot. If you subscribe to the DTF podcast today, before 31 days in May, right?
Yeah.
Before May 31st, and as a channel on the DTF Cyber Podcast, we get to 500 or more, we are personally purchasing someone a custom suit. Now, the person that I use for like tailoring stuff, not in the U.S., but he flies in twice a year. And he's actually going to be here from the 28th through the 30th. So coincidentally, we didn't even know that this was happening, by the way, because we talked about this like last episode. And since then, I got a text from the guy saying, hey, I'm coming in. So funny enough, it worked out. So if we get to 500 subscribers by May 31st, we're picking one lucky winner to get a fresh, drippy blazer. So much drip that the people at the tech conferences will think you're a CEO. I don't know, but that's the ad. 100% free. And if we don't get there, well, we just get to keep our money. So if you're in the tech world, you want a blazer, all you have to do is subscribe. And from there, we'll pick someone and they'll get a custom fit blazer. And if they happen to live in Arizona, we'll even send the guy to their place, right? Or have you meet the person and he'll measure it on the spot. You pick the material and then he'll ship it to you in about a month and a half. So that's the ad. Back to the show. Okay. So we're talking about essentially some of these scams, right? One of them being the robbery, right? The crypto stuff on our account. People talking about, what do I do with my crypto? People being robbed in Vegas for some of their assets. Google then stopping down some of these malicious sites. But here's an interesting one. It is going back to when people take out ads that are scams. I forget, what is that called? It's obviously it's
Malvertising, yeah.
What is it?
So malvertising, malware, like malvertising happens all the time, yeah.
So malvertising. So this is an interesting thing because a lot of times when people go, the phrase of just Google it, right? Or just Google it. Well, if you Google it, sometimes the bad actors malvertise and they will take out a website that looks like a legitimate website for a tool that you need.
With a URL very similar to what you're looking for.
Yeah, right. So most people at .com, .net don't matter, right? So this is an interesting one because this one is specific to RVTools. And if you don't know what RVTools is, you're probably not on the infrastructure side of the business, right? Or not necessarily. You're not in the data center part of the business because RVTools is very widely used by companies that want to get an understanding of what their environment looks like to baseline it. And the reason they would need that is if they're looking to do an upgrade, say they're buying new servers, they want to understand what sort of compute power they need to put in a colo or keep on site at a primary location. They need to understand what their compute needs are. And RVTools is a really cool tool. It is free, by the way, where you can go in, turn it on, it records information, kind of like telemetry type stuff, but this is for data center equipment specifically, usage, memory, storage, all this stuff. And you usually let it run for a week, including weekends. And then once you have that, you have a pretty good baseline on what your infrastructure needs.
Sounds like a reconnaissance tool for hackers. That's what it sounds like.
Well,
yeah.
When you say it like that, yeah. But in most cases, it's the purpose of it is as a free tool for people to get information so they can size correctly. Because you don't want to spend a few $1,000,000 and find out that you didn't spend enough. So this is a free way to do it. The problem with free stuff is it could go sideways. And I think in a lot of cases here, when they build this website out, what they're planning on is people that don't have budget for certain tools from VMware has one, VMware Aria has it. There's a company called Turbonomics that does it. So you can get all these things from different companies. A lot of them are paid for. RVTools is free. So I think people in this situation may not have budget to go out and buy the actual tools that are sold to do this. So they go Googling, how can I do this? And the first one that always pops up is RVTools. The problem is when the bad actors make a mirror site and you click on it, things blow up, right?
So they take you to the wrong site with some other malicious developer that has a similar tool that inserts a backdoor. So like we just said, the hacker reconnaissance is now available to somebody outside the organization.
Yeah. But so do you think that, I'm not clicking on the link, but do you think that they're offering the tool as is or they're just throwing out a dummy package? Like a tool that
most likely they package something in where they get access to the data, right? Whether they use that for malicious purposes or just for telemetry. There's so much you could do with that information. You can tell if a customer may be looking to buy hardware because they're at capacity.
Yeah.
Right. So that gives you a lot of information on the back end.
But most of these companies know that. So if you were to buy a storage platform, they have access to the volumes that you have.
That vendor that you use, yes, but not the competitor.
Oh, okay. So okay. I see what you're saying. So it's okay if I own a product for them to know my utilization.
I mean, that's a tricky one. Should they? I mean, this goes back to third-party risk. How much do you vet your vendors and the information they have and the access to that data they have?
Okay.
I don't know what the right answer is. I think in some cases there's going to be times where I want my vendor to be proactive and tell me, hey, you should think about expanding because you're going to hit a capacity limit soon.
Yeah.
It's going to impact your performance. It's going to impact, your delivery to your customers. Sometimes that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, there may be times where you don't want them to know.
Like when you're moving data off the storage.
Right. Maybe you got you got a second vendor. You maxed out the first one, and they say, well, you should increase your purchases with us. Do you tell them, oh, wait a second, I purchased a second storage array from a different vendor, and I'm moving it?
Do you? I mean, so that's an interesting topic. It's not necessarily the RVTools specific, but it kind of, and I think it's a situation a lot of executives find themselves in. Because maybe they're not happy with vendor one. Maybe they want to go to vendor two. They end up buying vendor two. Now both parties have access to what's being utilized. Like, what do you do in that spot?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a whole different topic. Let's go back to the RVTools one, because I think
I
this
just
really
wanted
important.
to dive in as well because if you think about RVTools as an example, but this happens so often in we have our employees going out to, let's say, download the latest Chrome updater or what they think is the latest Chrome updater. They download a package of software that's actually a Chrome updater wrapped with a malware that's going to be persistent on the machine. It's not just related to RVTools. This is just the next example. But, we see this all the time where hackers will take a legitimate software package off the net, usually the one that's free to download for people, and then they'll decompile it, add their little pieces of malware. Could be a backdoor, could be a call home, could be some type of a beacon, who knows? And then they recompile it and put it back up as the legitimate software in CNET or one of these other downloading spaces. And people download it all the time thinking they're getting one thing, but they're getting a package of malware. So my big thing here is if you have employees allowed to install on their local machines, that's a big red flag. So local admin rights should be gone. Sometimes it's not, but there are some things like Chrome that actually install in user space, and they don't need to be an administrator to install it. So you need to have checks and balances there. Hopefully your Sentinel-1 or your CrowdStrike or your Trellix is stopping those things. But if not, you should definitely be configuring it and tuning it so that it's looking at anything the user's trying to install from one of these sites, because you cannot trust them. And honestly, your IT admin should be the one installing software on that employee's machine. So, best case scenario, little self-service portal. They go in, say, I need the latest Chrome, and the enterprise version that you have approved comes down and gets installed. But that's a really best case scenario. But we do see this all the time. This is just a nice example.
I think one of the questions, right, comes back to what you said, Troy, is do you allow your users to install applications locally on their laptops? Those local admin rights is a big, really, it's a big problem. I don't know how many organizations can say, well, we lock down that machine where we don't allow users to install anything. And then even if you do, you have browser extensions that don't necessarily need local admin rights to be installed. And so these tools that are popping up there, I think we've done phishing campaigns where we train people, don't click on these links, don't respond to the phishing emails. Yeah. But I think there needs to be more training on be careful what you download onto that local machine to install, because you think these tools are going to help you and become more efficient. And the same thing with AI, actually. I think AI is a big benefit for productivity. But are we implementing the right tools? Are we making sure that our data is not leaking out through these tools? I think most workers have the right mindset. They just want to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. But there has to be a check. And that's why a lot of organizations have third-party risk assessments for applications they install, services, SaaS services they use, or even AI services that they allow their employees to use.
Interesting. What percentage of companies do you think actually have that in place, though, like third-party risk management?
I think it's pretty high. I mean, every CISO that I've spoken to, they all have it. I'd be surprised that if there's an organization that doesn't have at least a review process of what tools are being used. Now, the maturity of different organizations for what they do for third-party risk management might be different, but there are tools out there that you can leverage to help drive the risk assessment for third parties.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot to ask.
And I think third party risk has really evolved into supply chain risk. If you think about SolarWinds attack, supply chain being that SolarWinds had a Russian malware installed in their software that was then deployed to all their customers. So how could the end user understand that SolarWinds had been compromised to have that? It's just your entire supply chain risk. That was a very unique case, but I use that as an example of you have to think about not just your third parties, but your fourth parties in some cases. And so I think third party risk, as Damien said, is quite common to have as a focus area for CISOs and for security leaders, but the maturity of that program is certainly at question. But I do think that we are going to see a world where supply chain and third party risk is going to continue to be a big Achilles heel for us. Even hearkening back to the Target days when their HVAC vendor was the reason for the big breach that caused the credit card numbers to be leaked. So I think we're going to be tackling that for a long time to come.
Yeah, an HVAC vendor, that's your third party. But then what vendors is that third party, the HVAC vendor, using that could get them compromised, right? So there's like you said, Troy, the fourth party risk and that chain of events. It could get quite complex.
Sounds like a lot of work from my perspective to just, just guessing how many vendors like an enterprise customer interfaces with on a regular basis. And I'm not talking about like in tech specifically. I'm talking about like HR, right? Which is actually, it's unrelated to like some of the articles that we talked about today, but it was something that I was reading where it was saying HR is actually the number one target for a lot of these threat actors, right? Because if you think about HR, they're interviewing people they don't know, right? They're not involved with the company. They're just potentially a random person out there. They're sending files back and forth, right? They're downloading things or uploading things. And it's like the perfect storm of if I need someone to click a link or click something, I can just be a fake applicant. If I get far enough in the process, I need to send my resume. But I guess, they have tools for uploading the resume, and probably this big reason is the risk with it. But just goes to show that there's a lot of options for someone to reach out to someone in HR and say, hey, this is my stuff. Go ahead and take it or download it, or here's a copy of my birth certificate, right? So maybe that's just another interesting topic for another time, but it did come to mind when we were talking about this, different ways people can get compromised within an organization. So I think now we're to the part where we're closing in on the last topic. So last week, CrowdStrike had some layoffs. I think it was 5%, right? And I don't necessarily want to talk about the layoffs. I think what was interesting to me about the layoffs was they said it was in favor of pursuing AI, right? And what that means. You see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn where they say, if you're not using AI, you're falling behind. AI is coming for your job, right? And I have a feeling that part of that is true, but maybe if it's not that AI is coming for your job, it's maybe people that are leveraging AI to be more efficient are coming for your job. Maybe is a better way to put it. But I'm curious, like if a company is going to have a reduction in force, and they're looking to maybe allocate those funds toward AI, how are they doing that? Like, from each of your perspectives, if you're in a situation where you have to lose 5% of your workforce, maybe what are some of the things that you would be looking at, or how would you be leveraging AI from like an executive position? Maybe it's AI SOC, right? Maybe it's AI level 1 support, right? Like, where are people choosing to spend their money in 2025 with safe AI tools. Can you guys help with that?
Is there anything safe? I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to hear where the efficiencies came from, right? So we're talking about 5% of the workforce. I think CrowdStrike grew by more than 30% in the year previous. So you see revenue growth and company growth, and then a layoff. And if they're attributing it to AI efficiencies, I would love to hear what those exact efficiencies was. Was that in manufacturing processes? Was that in sales? Was that in business development, marketing? There's so many components of the business that could have affected. Maybe it affected all of them. Maybe it's the bottom 5%. But the question to me is like these were a lot of good people that I see now on LinkedIn who are looking for roles. Just curious how that decision tree happened. Right, we used AI to find efficiencies that allowed us to cut 5%. I mean, that sounds great on the surface, but diving into that might help us all understand how we can leverage AI to be more efficient and do more with less, as they say. But it would help others understand what they need to do to improve in their job so that they can kind of have a safe place that they're going to continue to work for years to come. So there's a lot of people uneasy because of that statement.
Yeah, I don't know the details of how they mentioned AI. It could also be the fact that they want to focus the business more on AI, not leverage AI. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, was that clarification in the article? Because if you're trying to focus more on AI and you don't need developers in a certain area, and now you want to repurpose 5% of the work staff to focus on developing more AI,
yeah,
that could make, for a company like that, that's a software technology company, that makes sense. So
yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to use as a discussion point or to start the discussion. CrowdStrike's a fantastic company, right? Probably one of the fastest growing in cybersecurity's history, and one of the most popular as well. So love CrowdStrike. I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of start writing that novel of how AI is going to reshape the future, which is a good thing. It's not great that people lost their jobs, but what I mean by that is it could help others understand what they need to do to get ready for the future. It could also help other companies understand how to invest in AI so they can be more efficient too. So there's a lot of really positive outcomes here. I just think we need to accentuate them and talk about them and bring them into the light so that there's not as much uncertainty.
Yeah, I guess we just don't know enough about the CrowdStrike scenario, but I agree, Troy. CrowdStrike has a really great product, and they've been doing really well. So it's not any means of, hey, we're doing poorly. It's redirection of effort in this case.
Yeah. Well, I saw something that I thought was interesting too. Is someone posted online about why they chose to do it the week after RSA, right? And in this post, the person talked about how anyone that was affected could have been at RSA networking, right? And to me, that seems a little ambitious to say that someone just got laid off. They're going to spend $3,000 plus $1,500 a night to go to RSA once they got laid off. I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this person, but they seem to have a lot of people chiming in that agreed with it. But from my perspective, I was laid off before I got into sales, right? Funny story, not necessarily funny, but my wife needed a surgery. So we spent, we wrote a check for like $9,000 on a Thursday to the doctor's office for an outpatient procedure, right? And that Friday, I got the paperwork saying, you're being laid off with like 20 other people. It was a lot of the engineering staff. That money was gone, right? The money that I spent for the surgery was gone. And I got a severance check, but it was only like a few months, maybe 3 months. And the last thing I would have been thinking about is, how do I go to a conference to find a job? I think a lot of, and this is not necessarily cyber specific, but I think it's good for people to understand this is like, if you're networking when you need a job, it's probably the worst time to be networking. Like, you'll see a lot of people get laid off and then all of a sudden their LinkedIn fires up. It's like it's been sitting in the closet for hibernating. And then as soon as they need a job, they're online every single day posting, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that seems backwards. To me, it seems like if you're not networking and meeting people before you actually need the job, you're probably falling behind. Because it comes across to me as very, I'll do the work when I need to do the work versus I'll put in the work to help others when they need the help, right? And maybe it's the wrong idea, but to me, like if you're not meeting people at events, you go into local community events, you're not meeting people at the East Valley meetup, right? The East Valley meetup here in Arizona, there's tons of people that go to that, but if you're not going to that, meeting these people, interfacing with them when you're gainfully employed, it comes across as, I need this now, so help me, versus, hey, I don't need anything, I'm just making friends. Like, am I wrong in saying that? It's, kind of off topic.
I think you're spot on in some cases, right? But, you just don't know that that's going to happen to you, right? So I don't fault people for, hey, I've just had a, life-changing event. Now I need to get back on LinkedIn and reach out to my network, right? That's what LinkedIn is for in a lot of cases, right? So sometimes it's the chicken or the egg, which is going to come first. But to your point, Fern, definitely want to always be thinking about your network, lifting others up when you can, when you're in a position to help others, introduce people, make sure that they have opportunities and because you never know when you're going to find yourself in the hot seat and not have a job. So I think that, being a good friend all the time is helpful. And when you're out looking in, trying to find your next spot, that, what you've put out, the karma will come back.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being laid off. I think all three of us have at some point in our career. Mm-hmm. It just happens, right? There's business decisions that happen. And I've been on the other end of that where, I've had to restructure my team and let people go. So it's going to happen. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think going to a conference is the right place to go and network and find a job. So I highly doubt that's what happened.
Yeah.
Maybe on the sales side, I don't know. But to me, like you said, it's just your normal networking that happens over the course of your career. I've had a number of people reach out to me to say, hey, I'm potentially looking for a new CISO gig. Do you know anything? And, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We just make the connections if they line up. But yeah, you're right. That networking has to happen throughout your career. It's not something you turn off and on.
Yeah. It definitely seems like LinkedIn has a lot more of the don't have a job. Let me hit the flames on the stove and start cooking versus, I've been here the whole time just meeting people or doing stuff. And I think it comes across as more genuine because, like, for example, out of all the people that I know, there's probably 6 people that work at CrowdStrike. Now, of those 6 people, if I saw 2 of them in the grocery store, I would say hi. Like, hey, what's up? And they would say, oh, hey, Fern, what's up? Like, they wouldn't know my name. The other 4, they for sure wouldn't know who I am. So what I did was I reached out and said, hey, saw what happened. Is everything good on your side? And thankfully, both of them said, yeah, we're all good. Thanks for checking in, man. I really appreciate it. But what you see a lot of times too is people on LinkedIn, they'll say, hey, my network is your network. It's like, well, that's great. But like when someone needs a job or someone's out of a job, I think reaching out to them either on their personal cell phone, right? Not to sell them, but to offer them help is that or direct message and saying, hey, like, is there anything I can do to help? The thing that people don't need is someone saying, my network is your network, right? Just, like Troy said, lift them up if you can. Reach out to them directly. So if you know anyone that was affected by CrowdStrike layoff, instead of saying, I can help anyone that needs help, reach out to the people that you know. Make sure if you know them and you can recommend them, do what you need to help them find their next spot, right?
And Fern, I know we're getting short on time here, but I wanted to ask this question because I think it's important as we close out this segment. Is like, I know a lot of people on the market right now, from the CISO all the way down to security engineers and sales engineers and so on. Now is not the greatest time to be looking for a role because there's so many people out looking right now. Is that indicative of what the future is going to hold for us? Is this going to get any better? And maybe with AI, maybe these cuts are the ones that are very public, but maybe companies are slowing their hiring processes as well because they're finding efficiencies with the teams they already have. So, just a little, thought of reflection here. Are we in trouble as an industry with people looking for roles? And there's a lot of talent out there that I know right now looking. Are we in an existential crisis?
Yeah, there are a lot of really good talent that's available right now. Mm-hmm. What I've been seeing over the past few years is that the CISO, the normal CISO rotation and executive rotation hasn't been happening at the same pace, pre-COVID. And I don't know why that is. But a lot of people are staying in their jobs longer, not just at the executive level, but also at the architectural engineering manager level as well. So, I always say it's never greener on the other side. The grass is never always greener on the other side. So maybe what you have is really good.
Yeah.
So if you're currently employed, well, think about the ones that aren't, right? That are struggling to find a job for their families, but also not taking just the next job available. You got to figure out what's a good fit where you're going to succeed and provide value to that organization. So I think that's a hard one to do, because if you absolutely need to find a job to support your family, you take that job, and if you're not a good fit, you're not going to succeed there either.
Here's another cautionary tale. I love these to end up, but if you have a job today, if you're in a position and you're thinking maybe I should jump, maybe I should do this, unless you have some real good reasons, I would stay where you are, and here's why. If you jump to a new company and then they decide they need to have some downsizing or layoffs for financial reasons or because they're trying to find efficiencies, it's first in, last. It's the last in, first out. So it means the newest hires are the ones that let go first. So, could you imagine leaving this job you've had for 2 or 3 years to go to a new place you're excited about, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, a month later, you get let go? I've seen it happen many times. This is not, an imaginary scenario. So, as you look at stability for your role, for your family, for your finances, make sure you're really considering that, because right now is a very unstable, uncertain time for security professionals. And if you have a really good job, I would hang on to it.
Yeah, I would. Let me counter that a little bit, because I don't want people to say, I got a job, so let me just stay here. I think if you find that there's an opportunity that you're really ambitious about, and you want to stretch your career, and you want to go after it, right? Take the chance. Mm-hmm. But if it's I think what Troy said, really, if it's a lateral move to another same position, same level, but maybe it's just a little bit more money, is it worth it? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. But I think the risk is always worth the reward, usually, right? You find that people tend to avoid risk, just, scared money doesn't make money mentality. And maybe that's why we're here today. Maybe that's why we're on the DTF podcast, is because I can't think of a podcast out there that has 3 cool guys hanging out, talking about cyberpodcast.net on weekly news topics, how they're relevant to business, how executives could be thinking about these stories, and, frankly, how over, we'll say 50 years of experience, cyber specific between both of you, Damien and Troy, that it's like phone a friend, right? This is the equivalent of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you phone a friend to answer the question. And I think if there's current topics that people are looking to get advice on, or at least just some perspective, sounding board essentially, candid feedback, DTF is where they need to be. And if you're not listening to the podcast, hopefully you're watching it. But the idea is we're taking a risk, right? We're going out there, putting our voices out there, kind of speaking from experience, and hopefully helping other people along. And, we hope if you listen to the end here, you love the stories, you like the perspective, you had fun, and then you're going to join us next week. And then, of course, that you're going to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All you need to do, cyberpodcast.net, hit subscribe, and you'll be entered in to the free blazer. One lucky winner, custom blazer, hand sewn, with your name embroidered on the inside pocket. Could be you. Definitely won't be you if you don't subscribe. So I think that's all we have for today. Any closing words from you, Damien or Troy?
Onward and upward for me. Just keep doing what you're doing. Make the world a better place.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
All right. We'll see you next week.